I was listening to one of the Talking Heads shows this morning, and one of the commentators made an interesting remark. They were talking about Korea, North Korea, and a number of the people did not have a lot of obviously positive things to say about the country, not because of the mishegas they're doing now, but because it's really been, it's a country which is by nature a prison for its own inhabitants. It's one of the few places where instead of capturing someone and then torturing their lives, the citizens of that country are the real victims of the mishegas of the leadership. And everybody in the country is basically trapped. And every year thousands of people starve to death because they can't literally get enough nutrition to survive. And on top of that, they waste their resources on nuclear bombs and missiles and so on. So they were talking, and he said something which really got to me. He said, he said, North Korea is really the Auschwitz of today. And I was struck with a very strong sense of ambivalence in responding to what he said. And it really is a little bit about the nature of how we are these 60-odd years, 65 years later, more from the Holocaust, how we who are sort of charged with the legacy, charged with keeping Zachor, keeping the memory alive, how we deal with the very words, the language, and the concept of the Holocaust. Don't we want it, on one hand, to be generalized? Don't we want it to be a tool that says, never again, not just for the Jewish people, but for those who are victimized en masse, who are innocent victims and are, for whatever reason, picked on, starved to death, and so on. And yet, on the other hand, it's not everybody's. It's not the universal experience. It was a uniquely Jewish one. And I think that as the years go on, that tension is going to become constant, and all of us are going to have to sort of deal with it. We don't own it as a copyright, and yet we do own it as a copyright. And maybe eventually the term Shoah will become the unique term for the Jewish experience, and Holocaust will become generalized. But even then, I said, he didn't say Holocaust and Shoah, he said Auschwitz. And I think the power of that term will continue. And maybe in the end, ultimately, we can honor the memory of those who perished in the Holocaust if the term is used as a vehicle to try to see that other people as well are not exterminated. So I just thought it was kind of appropriate on the day that is the eve of Yom HaShoah that would be an expression that we heard. I'd like you to turn to page 6 in our booklet, and we're going to read responsively. Father Adonai, Creator, who set the round course of the world, birth, death, and disease, as most things in Judaism, which are tied to historical events, which are observed on the calendar, that which makes them binding and meaningful are rituals that become assigned and eventually become the tradition. And so it is that with Yom HaShoah, which is observed on the 27th of Nisan, Yom HaShoah has a certain number of rituals. And one of them that has become, it didn't come from Sinai, it evolved and has become now virtually universal in most gatherings in memory of the Shoah, is the lighting of a 6-candle candelabrum for the 6 million. We're going to now light 6 candles for the honor of the 6 million. First, though, as we do so in the background, we'll be hearing a psalm chanted, and each family, but for the first candle, there's a little family background so that you'll hear the story of the people who are being honored. So we're going to hear more about our speaker and his experience and the family later, but the first candle will be lit by the small family. Second candle is going to be lit in honor of Isidore Bernstein by the extended family, and a little bit of the background of the story is going to be told by his grandchildren.
Isidore Bernstein, my grandfather, was born as Isidore Kawa in the town of Sochacin, Poland, July 1916. He grew up belonging to Zionist youth groups, and by 1939 had made several attempts to leave Europe for British Mandate Palestine. When the Germans invaded Poland, he was a young businessman with a company that manufactured buttons and had several employees. His immediate family consisted of his mother, Pessa, two sisters, Miriam and Devorah. In December 1941, in the middle of the night, they were pulled out of their home, forced into trucks, they were beaten, taken to a detention center, and several weeks later, they were separated. My grandpa Izzy was sent to Königsberg, Germany, where he was a forced laborer. There he acquired the professional skills of an industrial painter, a skill that would save his life. He remained in Königsberg for over a year. Following Königsberg, he was sent to Buna Manowicz, a subcamp of Auschwitz. He remained there for a year and a half as a slave laborer. Injured several times, he always managed to convince the Germans of his skills, and he would be hospitalized. In 1944, he was transferred to Dachau. On the very day he was scheduled for a death march, he was liberated by American forces in April 1945. Liberated, he discovered he had no family to return to. He moved on to Italy to a refugee camp where in 1946 he met his wife, Celia. They immigrated to the United States in June 1948.
My grandmother, Celia Kawa Bernstein, was born in the town of Lviv, Belarus, in the country of Poland in November 1924. She was educated in a Beit Sefer Tarbut, a private Jewish day school where all subjects were taught in modern Hebrew. She had 5 brothers, and all were involved in Zionist movements. In 1939, the area was invaded by the Russian army, and the population lived under Soviet occupation. In late 1941, the Germans invaded eastern Poland, breaking their agreement with the Soviet Union. The Russians were pushed back, and life became hell as the Germans advanced. Celia, along with her family, was forced to live in the town ghetto. In May 1942, of the 3,000 Jews in the town, 2,524 were killed and buried in a mass grave. In December 1942, at 18 years old, Celia escaped from the ghetto with the help of Jews from the famed Belsky brothers. This was a painful and tough decision filled with fear. She never saw her parents or remaining family members again. She lived in the Naluboki forest of Belarus for 2 years, and in the bitter cold and the sweltering heat. As a member of the partisan movement, she participated in raids and sabotages against the Germans. She was liberated by Russian forces in late 1944, early 1945. Emerging from the forest, she discovered all of her family members had been killed. Alone, she eventually migrated to Italy with the help of the Jewish Brigade. She met her husband, Izzy, in 1946, and they married in Rome in May 1948. They later migrated to America in June 1948.
Put it in. The third candle is going to be lit in honor of the family of Henny Katz. Henny's father, Sasha Katz, lost most of his family, including all 5 siblings, their spouses, and children. Henny would like to honor especially the memory of her father's first 3 children and their mother, Basia. That means that Henya lost 3 siblings, twin baby brothers, and a sister. Is Simon Grossman here? The next candle is supposed to be lit by Simon Grossman. He was born in 1921 in the town of Yashina, which is now in the Ukraine. It previously was Czechoslovakia and Hungary. His parents were Mordechai, Anshel, and Chana. He had 3 sisters, Tova, Konya, and Malka, and 1 brother, Betzalel. In September of 1941, he was in Budapest in a forced labor camp with his brother. That month, his parents and sisters were marched to Kamenets-Podolsky with thousands of other Jews, where they were made to dig their own graves and were shot to death there. His younger brother didn't last in the labor camp. He is the only family member to survive the Holocaust. He spent 4 years in the forced labor. He escaped by jumping out of a second-floor window. His will to survive and his faith in God have always been the most important things to him. He met his wife shortly after the war. She was a Holocaust survivor as well. So the Holocaust was something that they would never forget. We were there, and we are, he says, a testament to the horrible atrocity. Despite the actions of the Nazis, he survived. He went on to be a businessman and raised a family of his own. Mindy will light the candle for Simon. Siegbert Kolko, better known as Siggy, was born in Germany in a city called Arnswald. He lived there with his mother, father, and grandparents. His father worked with his father-in-law in the livestock business. In 1933, times grew bad for Jews in their small town, so they moved to Königsberg, East Prussia. In 1939, in Kristallnacht, several large synagogues were destroyed. All the Jewish children were sent to a school for Jewish children only. It was time to leave Germany. His father had siblings in the United States, but his mother could not leave her parents behind. In 1941, they were all deported to Theresienstadt from Königsberg, as his father had been a soldier in the German army in World War II and was wounded. You were considered to be privileged if you were sent to Theresienstadt. His grandparents both died there. His mother and father and he were deported to Auschwitz. The last time Ziggy saw his parents was at the railroad station. One day, a German manufacturer of airplane propellers needed workers. He was 16 years old and tall and strong. He was picked to a small camp called Friedland near the Czech border. He worked there until the summer of '44, when the Russian troops liberated him. From Friedland, he went to Frankfurt, where he was told that he told Hayes that his father had family in the United States. He wanted to go there. It was easier to go to the U.S. because he was born in Germany, and the quota for Germany was very small due to the fact that most German Jews were killed. So in 1946, he was on the second boat bringing refugees to the United States. Come on up. finally, with the last candle, we look forward and not backwards, and we invite our youth to come up, led by Noah Peskin, who visited the camps on a previous trip to the camps into Israel. He'll come up with the rest of the youth group to light the sixth and final candle. I'm going to ask everyone for a moment to rise. We'll recite a special Kaddish of remembrance for the martyrs of the Jewish people throughout the ages, and especially of the Holocaust. Kishinev, Warsaw, Auschwitz, Dachau, Buchenwald, Babi Yar, Baghdad, Hebron. Amen. Yehei Shmei Rabba Mevorach Leolam Umeomaya. Kfar Etzion, Mayence, Terezin, Treblinka, Bergen-Belsen, Vilna and Mauthausen, Usha, Masada, Jerusalem. Amen. 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 Would please remain standing for the Borchu on page 8. Be seated. We continue silently. In the fall, we had a bat mitzvah in the shul, and the family talking about the bat mitzvah was telling me about some of the exciting things that one of the grandfathers of the bat mitzvah had been involved in, and in fact said there's a movie that's all about his involvement in the partisans, and in fact you can see a trailer online. So I did, and when I finished seeing it online, I said, any chance we can get Grandpa to speak at Yom HaShoah? And I want you to see the trailer, and you'll be caught up to who he is and why I wanted you to hear from him today. So first, let's see the trailer, and then I'll introduce our speaker.
Thank you for putting the lie back into the teeth of those who said Jews did not fight back.
The bullets, I could hear it right beside me, and I wasn't afraid at all.
These people cared about saving as many people as possible. They weren't only looking after their own lives.
I remember when he got married, and he was one of the youngest guys after the war that he married, and then after that I came to America, and we were never in contact with each other after we said goodbye.
I'm hoping that I can find somebody that will know my parents, somebody that was around the same age as my parents would be if they were alive today, that would remember them. So this is like a family reunion.
Look how wonderful to see you again after 50, 60 years.
I was with your father. My first train would be derailed.
When I walked over and I saw Leon, my heart started beating. Like, you have to realize that 65 years is not 65 days. It's something that I never thought that in my lifetime I will see Leon again.
Oh my God.
Well, we hugged each other like two brothers. Then we had a ball, you know.
Partisans who had taken extraordinary measures, risking their lives, physical resistance, spiritual resistance. They are heroes among us, and their vital histories need to be shared and saved now more than ever.
I felt I'm fighting not only for myself, I was fighting for the Jewish people. That's what I'm proud of it.
Sag nicht kein Mal, als du gehst dem letzten Weg. Gott Himmellein, verstehen neue Tag.
You are the future. Remember your history. Stand up for what is right and never give up. We got so close together like it's one family.
It's very hard for me, but I loved every second of it.
Well, one of the people prominently featured was Alan Small. He's, by the way, here today with a special guest, Judith Ginsburg, who he hadn't seen until the event of the reunion, and met her for the first time after 64 years. And we're pleased that she's here and honored by her presence. I would like to call now on Alan Small to come and to talk with us a little bit.
Thank you very much. And thank you to my family and my friends that are here, and especially Judith Ginsburg. She's the lady that you have seen now in the film. And that's when we met after about 60 some odd years. We haven't seen each other. and thanks to the Jewish Partisan Educational Foundation. So many stories have been told and written about the Holocaust, and each story that we have read or listened to from Holocaust survivors is unique in itself. Each story is unique. But there is also some things that I would like to speak to you about a young boy who was 11 years old when the war broke out in 1939. He survived the war, and his life story has been told in many places, in Yale University, Rutgers University, and other places. And I want to tell you about this boy's story. That little boy is me. And that was 74 years ago. I'm 85 today. There's so many things that I really don't know where to begin. Because it just happened. In Yiddish they say it's bashecht. It's meant to be. And a young lady before was speaking here, and she was talking about her grandmother, where her grandmother comes from, where she was during the war. And it just happened that I was born there. And I was there during the war, and I was in the partisans, which we'll speak later and we'll see, because I really don't remember your mother. You know, maybe the names were changed, like my name is not Alan Small. My name used to be Abraham Shmulowitz. And now my name is Alan Small. As I said before, the war broke out in 1939. I was 11 years old. After 2 weeks, the war was over. Poland was defeated, and eastern part of Poland was occupied by the Russians, and the western part of Poland was occupied by the Germans. And we lived under the Russian occupation for about almost 2 years, till 1941. In 1941, June 22nd, we got up, and we see things are going up, tanks are going back and forth, and the army, the Russian army, doesn't know where to go west or go east, because they were not prepared for the war with Germany. After 2 weeks, our town was occupied by the Germans. But when the town was occupied by the Germans, the people, let me just explain something, and I speak from my heart. I don't speak from written speeches. I don't write the speeches. I tell you like it was. Some people might disagree with me, but like I said, if you tell the truth. The Polish people, when the Germans came in, you see, the town where I was born and the town that the young lady mentioned was Jewish people. There were about 3,000 Jewish families, not families, but Jewish people, and the rest of them were Polish people. East of Evia was mostly Russian, Belarusian, White Russians. Evia itself, there were Polish people. And west of Evia, there were also Polish people. So the Polish people started robbing the Jewish homes, and they volunteered. It's not a question that people are drafted into an army. The Polish people in town was very willingly joined the Germans, and for one reason and one reason only. They joined them is to kill the Jews and help them with everything that the Germans needed, as long as it's against the Jewish population. And that I want to emphasize, because people don't say it so openly, honestly, the way I do. We're trying to be diplomatic. When we talk about the Holocaust, there's no reason for to use any diplomacy. We got to tell it like it is. As I said, the German army occupied us, and we were there until 8 months later. Not 8 months later, but actually August the 2nd, they surrounded the town and told all Jewish men from 16 to 60 to report in the marketplace. And they picked out the rabbinical staff, the teachers, all the intelligentsia, and business people. And among them was my father. And they killed that time my father, August 2nd, actually, in 1941. 8 months later, they killed my mother, my grandmother, and 2 of my sisters. That day they killed 2,500 Jewish men, women, and children. And I was not going to go in the way everything took place because I get very emotional, but it was almost unbelievable. So when they surrounded the area where they just lived, the 8th of May, and they kept us in the homes until May 12th. And for the 4 days we stayed in the houses without allowing us to go to the outhouses. We didn't have any plumbing inside. And anybody that left the house, they would kill them right away. May 12th, they started telling us to get out, all the Jewish people, to get out in the center of town. And they started screaming and yelling and knocking on the doors, and the Germans and the Polish police, which they knew every single family, the Jewish family. And as my mother started walking out with my sisters and my grandmother, I wanted to go to him. My mother held me back and she says, no, you're not going to go with us. You must climb into the attic, and that's how you're going to survive, and you'll be able to tell the story. And I started crying and pulling over her sleeve, and she insisted for me to hide. And I went into the attic, and that's how I survived that terrible day. After that was in May, and in December, they made the ghetto right after this May 12th. And 8 months, December, I got to figure in my own head, it's from May to, it's about 5 months later, or 6 months later, they took out another 800 Jews, and they took them to another place, which my oldest sister survived in the beginning with the baby, and they took them to not far from Minsk, a city called Borisov. And they killed the rest of them, with the exception of a few men they sent to Auschwitz. Some of them survived, some didn't. I ran away in December when they came to liquidate the ghetto in Evia. Where I ran, you know, I didn't know myself, but my heart was pulling me, and always my mother was on my mind, that she said, you have to survive. And I ran away, and I went to one village, to another village, and then I went to a village, actually, which is called Nikolaevo, which is about 10 miles east of the town of Evia. And a very wonderful family, Christian family. They are Russian Orthodox, and she knew my entire family. They took me into their home, kept me for 2 weeks, and I met up with partisans. First, I met up with renegades, not the real partisans, because I didn't know the difference. I didn't know about partisans when I ran away from the ghetto because I was too young yet. At the same time, the people that were older than them, they were trying to organize a resistance, because every Jew wanted to be a resistance. But we had a problem those days, and people don't realize it even when they talk about it. We have no place to run, because if you ran to the outside of the ghetto, they'll turn you in to the Germans. Or if they'll hide you, sooner or later, they're going to kill you. And what I joined, finally, I joined up in January of 1943 with the real partisans. And I can only speak for myself and also what I have seen. Many cases I have seen were Jews from Evia, and I remember, you know, the names. With one thing I remember the names. The partisans wouldn't take you in because they always wanted you to have either rifles with you. Without a rifle, you didn't stand a chance to join the partisan. Finally, from our hometown in Evia, there were young men, actually, that tried to escape also. They joined the partisans, and they performed heroic things during the war. Judith's husband was one of them, and his brother, the Ginsburgs, the two brothers, they were heroes in the partisans. When I say heroes, I mean heroes. And there were other ones. Then I know also Jewish guys that came, and the partisans got them, the real Russian partisans, and they took the rifles away from them, and they also killed them. So there was no place, even in the partisans. And the other cities, you know, we hear about the Warsaw uprising, we hear about the other uprisings, but actually every ghetto, the Jewish people try to establish a resistance or to take the Jews out of the ghetto. But there was no place to run, because some of them ran away and then left behind the family and the children, and it was almost impossible. you know, because to leave kids and leave their mothers and brothers and sisters and knowing that they're going to be killed. So some of them came back to the ghetto. And of course, you know, it wasn't easy, you know, and I left my sister, my older sister, but she survived the big day of that, you know, May 12th. And she was there with her baby yet. And I snuck into the ghetto, and I came in, and because it pulled me back, going back to her, I felt in a way that it's my responsibility to go back to the ghetto. And I came, and she was surprised because she thought that I was killed, you know, after I escaped, you know, because she didn't know whether I was lucky to escape or not, because it's a very long story for me to describe even how I escaped, you know, under what circumstances. And I came in, and about 4 or 5 days later, we got up and we see the entire ghetto is, the remaining Jews must have been about 800 to 1,000. The ghetto was surrounded, and it was the height of it was in January of 1943. And the Germans came out and announced that everybody's going to be transferred to a labor camp again, to the same city that I mentioned, Warsaw. And they told us to take with us X amount of clothes, I mean, weight 100 pounds or 200 pounds of belongings. But that was, we knew it's a fake, because they promised you to take you to a labor camp, but there was no labor camps. They used to take you and kill you someplace like in Borisov and other places. And I said to my sister, let me go out and see what's going on, because you were free to go around in the ghetto because they were waiting to take everybody out. And I walked over to the main gate, and something was telling me to run out of the gate. Well, they let out, there was a tannery in our town. And the tannery was very important to the Germans, because they were making leather for the saddles, you know, the horses and other leather things. So they told them to report in the center, and they opened up the gates. They let them out to the Gotera, and I got between the people there. And again, I'm trying to make it short, and I escaped again without, and I left my sister behind and the baby. And I remember she waved to me like this from far. And that's the last time that I saw my sister. Now, in the partisans, as I said before, the Jews wanted to join the partisans, but they didn't, you know, you go from one fire into another fire, because there were a lot of the white army, the underground, the Polish underground. They used to catch it. It was called Armia Krajowa, the people's underground. But they didn't fight. They were more interested in killing the Jews than killing Germans, because they really didn't care about us. Nobody wanted us. And the ones that survived were heroic, and I would say between 20 and 30,000 Jewish partisans they were in the resistance between all the countries. But I always say to myself, what is 20, 30,000 among 6 million? We lost 6 million, 1.5 million children, innocent kids that were killed. For what? Just because we were Jewish and the world stood still, nobody cared. There was nobody there to help us. So those that survived in the concentration camps is a miracle. Those that were in the underground that survived, they are really the heroes that survived the war. And I was in the partisans from January 1943. In the beginning, it was very tough for me because I was a young boy. At that time, I was going on 15, almost 15 years old. And they gave me a rifle. They used to give a number of bullets to the rifle. I didn't know how to shoot. I didn't know I had the rifle. And of course, you know, I participated in battles, going to put explosives on the railroads, destroy bridges and things, part of them. And then in 1943, in July of 1943, they surrounded the forest, the Germans, with the help of the. But again, I have to emphasize, we were afraid of the Germans, but we were afraid more of the Lithuanians, of the Polish, of the Ukrainians, because they were part even to not only the Jews, but the partisans. They were killing them, so they surrounded the forest, and they kept us there about maybe a couple of weeks or something. And Judith was there, you know, her family was there, and we survived that part of they surrounded the forest. Some of them were killed, and after they gave us, when they started liquidating the forest, you know, so they gave us all, once they thought it's going to be over in a few days, so they gave us each one, they sent us in small groups, because the smaller the group, the better chance we have to survive. As a matter of fact, you have seen, whoever's seen the movie Defiance, you know, the Defiance, where the Jews are crossing the swamps there, over there. Those are the swamps that we were hiding while they were trying to liquidate us, in the same swamps. And actually, a lot of my story that I was going to tell you is more or less, if you saw the movie, you can realize what it was. After 1943, towards the end, I became a scout in the partisans. If you all know probably what a scout is. And of course, it was a dangerous mission. I used to ride with another scout on horseback, and the group used to go behind us. And we went to different missions, mostly to destroy bridges and to destroy the railroad tracks, because we couldn't go into hand-to-hand battle with the Germans or with the Polish police or the Ukrainians. And that I was in the partisans till 1944. But I would love for you to know, for me to tell you more about it, but you know, you cannot tell in 15 minutes or 20 minutes that it took almost a lifetime. To me, at that time, a year is a lifetime. A young boy like me, the war started out, I was 11, and I had to go through all these things here, but I survived. What I do remember in my outfit, and the one thing that I have to mention to you, one of my experiences, which is well known among my friends, they put me on guard duty when I was in the partisans, and I was at that time 15 years old, and we had to stay from 8-hour shifts, 4-hour shifts for 24 hours. And prior to me, another Jewish boy was with me, and he stood the guard duty. And when I came to replace him, the sergeant of the guards took us there, and we had a password that as you hear approaching somebody, and they say, "Who's there?" And we had a password, like if, for instance, the password was rifle 5, so he would yell rifle 3, and I would have to answer rifle 2. So we know, in other words, we know that we are one of them. So as we approached, and he was older than me, a Jewish boy, and nobody yelled out the password. And we walked over, and he's standing, leaning against the tree, and he fell asleep. So we took the rifle from him, and I replaced him to the guard duty, and they arrested him. And at that time, the law was not the Russian law, it was in the American army also, certain things like that. And I rightfully so, you know, you fall asleep, you endanger the lives of hundreds of them. So it was automatically, you knew that they're going to execute you for that. I took him, and I replaced him. It was 2 o'clock in the morning. And as I replaced him, and I kept looking, I had a pocket watch, and I kept looking at I replaced him from 2 till 6 in the morning, 4 hours. It was in the spring of 44 already. And the birds are whistling and singing, you know, so beautiful, you know, the trees in the spring. And I see the last time I looked at the watch, and I see it's 5:45. And I said, 15 more minutes, I said, and they're going to replace me. And in the last 15 minutes, I stood and I fell asleep too. And the same story goes with me like with a young boy, and they came there with my rifle, and they put me under arrest. We had a bunker where we used to play it, and they sentenced me and him to be shot before a firing squad. As we were there was a captain. You see, a lot of things they say about a partisan. There were women partisans, 2 Jewish girls, you know, they were fighting, and one girl, she was, her boyfriend was one of the company commanders, captain, and she pleaded with him to go to plead on our behalf that how can they sentence us to be shot, because we are young boys ourselves. They shouldn't put us, you know, a boy of 15 to on guard duty for 4 hours and to endanger the lives of hundreds of them. And he was successful, and they gave us the punishment was 1 week, my friend and myself, in the bunk area, and they gave us 1 slice of bread a day and a glass of water. And after the week was over, they sent us on missions, you know, and that was, and then I was, like I said, I was there till 1944, till September, I think, at that time, where the Russian army chased the Germans out. But this, again, I would like to tell you things about what happened while in 1944. Not only that I was in the Scouts, but then I became, with the German army started retreating, I was an interpreter, you know, when we used to catch a lot of German prisoners, and we used to interrogate them there. And a lot of times, you know, they didn't know whether I was Jewish or not. And one instance, I must tell you, which I'll never forget, and as I was interrogating one German, and he says to me like this here, and I have to repeat it to my battalion commander already, and he says to me, if not for these damn Jews, we'd never be in trouble like this. They started the war. And I'm listening to him, and I can't believe it. He's telling me that. But I know damn well that if I turn around and interpret to my company commander that he blamed the Jews because they were anti-Semites themselves. So he said to me that if not for the communists, there would never be any trouble. And of course, yeah, the rest is history, whatever. He says, get rid of the SOB. We don't need him here. And there were many occasions like this because they didn't know who's a Jew, who's not. And I used to interpret everything and whatever I felt like, think that it suits me as a Jew. Because I was a Jew first, and a partisan second, and a Russian citizen second. And then I was drafted into I had a choice, actually, to go to because they allowed the Jewish people that were born in Poland, they could emigrate from because the part where Iviat, like you mentioned before, was by the Russians, so it was Belarus at that time. So we could go the Jewish people were allowed to go to Poland, but Poland was just like under the control of Russia anyway. But I didn't go because when it was mentioned to me to go to Poland or anything connected with it, I didn't want to hear about it because it is still today when people tell me, who do you hate most? I don't hate, you know what I mean? I know I hate. How can you hate? You must hate somebody that really is your enemy, somebody that is ready to kill you. And the people that were ready to kill me, I couldn't see myself going back to Poland. So they took me in the Russian army. Now I was in the Russian army from 1945 to 1946. And then, as you read in the papers, and some of you remember it, the anti-Semitism was started in Russia, unbelievable. And I didn't feel it myself because they never knew, a lot of them didn't know that I was Jewish, even because I spoke Russian fluently, and then I was working also in the office there in the army, and I didn't have it so bad. But I decided that I want to get out of Russia, and somehow, which again would take too much time, and I asked for a transfer to the Polish army. So they transferred me to the Polish army. On the way to the reporting near Warsaw, the train stopped in Białystok, if you heard this city, Białystok, on the train. And as the doors were open in the train, and two men are passing by the train, and they go and said like this, Amcho, Amcho, because there were a lot of, they were trying to get Russian soldiers with Jewish background, you know, because they wanted to send them to Palestine at that time. So I answered Amcha. So I got off the train, I followed them. We spent a couple of weeks in Białystok, and then from Białystok they put us the Brecha, if you remember that name. They put us into a German, in a camp. At that time they were sending all the German people, you know, back to the English zone or to the American zone, and they put us between the German people, and we pretending that we are Germans, and we kept quietly. And then when the train stopped from Poland going over to the English zone, they had to go to the Russian zone first, and they started going in, the Russian military police, and they checked the train cars, and they wanted to see if any deserters there, and they kept looking, and we were sitting all like this with our heads down, and somehow everything in life, I says, is bashert. This way, it was almost, and a guy puts a finger at me, and he says, you get off the train. to me. So I said to him in German, I said, ich verstehe überhaupt nicht, was Sie sagen. It means I don't understand what you're saying to me. So, and he speaks to me in Russian, and I pretend that I don't know anything. But I thought this was the end of me, because if they would know that I'm a deserter and I didn't, they would, yeah, you know what they would do with me. And finally, after a while, the sergeant said to the lieutenant, and he says to him, can't you see that SOB, German SOB, who the hell wants him? Let him go back on the train. Send me on the train. The train passed the English zone, placed them where I was supposed to go to Israel, to Palestine at that time. And, but then there was a blockade, as you all know, in Palestine, and they used to send them, every Jew that wanted to get into Palestine, send them to Cyprus, and we had to wait. While we were waiting, I went to with a few of my friends, I said, let's see a little bit of Germany while we were waiting. And we were in Hesse-Lichtenau, that's a camp further away. We got off, and we went to Munich, came to Munich, and we took a trolley car because we're somewhere where there's a Jewish camp. And they told us, the trolley car takes us to the camp. We get off the trolley car, and I see a man is standing there in front. And I look at him, and I said, I don't believe it. It couldn't be possibly a friend of mine. Sure enough, I go closer, there's a friend of mine. By then already, all the people, the survivors that left, what I told you before, by the survivors, they went there, and they were in that camp outside of Munich called Hesse-Lichtenau. And this is where I met then Judith and her family, you know, not in that camp, they were in Fernwald, which is not far from there. And of course, I was very surprised and happy. And after a short, I don't know, I was in that camp, must have been about till 1947, from 46 to 47. And I came to the United States, And thanks to, you know, this, for me it was an opening, you know, a new country, free country and all that. And I was very happy. And the Korean War broke out. And where do I go now? I've been in the partisans, I've been in the Russian army. Now I have to go to the American army. So I was drafted into the American army. So here, it's all happened between the age of almost 15, 14, and by then already I'm 18. No, I came here, I was 18, 19. I was 20 years old, and now we're going to serve the American army. So I was drafted in the army. The war was just started in Korea. And I was my basic training in Denver. But again, everything is, with all this, it's not a question of being a hero or being smart. You know, time teaches you everything, you know what I mean? And in the American army, you know, I was the first one, even I speak with an accent today. At that time, I hardly spoke English, but anyway, they sent almost the entire outfit to Korea. But since I passed the language test in Polish, Russian, and German at that time, I spoke fluently, and they sent me overseas to Europe in the American army. So I spent the rest of the time in the American army. And that was the best time of my life, because stationed over there as an interpreter, there was nothing to do because the war was over, and I had special privileges. And it came the Jewish holidays, and I said to the commanding officer, which is the truth. I mean, I said my aunt, my mother's sister, is alive in Palestine, in Israel by then, because she went to Israel with a lot of other friends. It was in 1933, and I was a little boy. I remember that. It was from the Zionist organizations. They went to Israel. They joined the kibbutzim, all that. Anyway, he gave me Froilov, my commanding of the American command, and I went to Israel, and that was beyond belief, because here, you know, I survived the war, and like I said, one army after another, and I came to Israel, and I saw my relatives, and of course, everything was wonderful. I came back, got out of the army, and what do? And if every survivor that came to America, if he came to relatives that they were butchers, he became a butcher. If you came to relatives that was in the garment industry, you went into the garment industry. I had no education, because the last time that I attended school was in 1939, and I was 11 years old, because under the Russians, by the time they transferred, you know, in other words, whoever went, I went to a Hebrew school, you know, before the war. My sister went to a public school. So they, so I didn't have any education. So my uncle was a operator in the garment industry. And he was actually well known because he was also in the union. And he says, what do you want to do? I said, how do I know what I wanted? I don't know what to do. So he said he was in the garment industry, so I went into the garment industry to work. Okay, so I worked in the garment industry. I learned to be a cutter. Then I became a head cutter. And one thing I learned, and before I turned around, I started, you know, getting myself, and I wound up, because as I said, we're not going to go into anymore, it'll take too much time, and I succeeded in the garment industry. I worked myself up to, in a very big company, to be president of the company. I'm sure you all heard about it, Anne Klein. Yes, yes, and I was the president of Anne Klein, and after being president, you know, for a while, then I was promoted to being senior corporate vice president for the entire corporation for world sourcing and production. And that's where I was there till the age of 72. And I probably would have been there because it was a very nice job, you know, with a lot of perks. But the company was sold and I retired, and here I am. I have a beautiful family over there. I have 8 grandchildren, excuse me, 8. I have 2 great-grandchildren. There I have my son Larry and my son Charles and my daughter-in-law Abby and my grandsons Scott, Stephen, and actually, if any one of you watched the television last year, now I got to, if you watch television, the reality show Miami Dance Moms, that's my daughter-in-law over there, and her daughter Sammy, and my granddaughter Michelle. You know, so I feel that I accomplished a lot in this country, and I'm very proud of my family. I'm proud of my friends, and like I said in the beginning, and I just want you to know something, because of the reunion over there, that was, I have a second family today, and that's where I get emotional. My second family is the Ginsburg family. It's the family that I always wanted, and I never had. Thank you very much.
So a lot of lessons in that very moving talk, not the least of which is, who needs an education? Sometime, obviously not today, but maybe there'll be another time when we can maybe get Alan and Larry back together and they can tell you about a trip they took. How many years ago was it when you went back with him? When we went back to his... 12 years ago. Yeah, I remember 12 years ago when you first came to me and said you're going back with your father back to the original village and so on.
But that you'll have to give me another 20 minutes.
I got a Shabbos morning. You can have a half hour. We'll even serve lunch.
Free lunch?
Free lunch. Please turn to page 20 for Elenu. Please rise. All except for mourners may be seated. Mourners, please rise to mourn Scottish.
Yikadal, Yikadash, Shemei Rabbah, Yalmad, Yibrach, Yirutei, Yamlik, Malputei, Chayekon, Yom Echon, Chayed, Chol Beit Yisrael, Ba'agalah, B'zman Karib, Yimru, Amen. Shemei Rabbah, Yitporach, Yishtabach, Yitpar, Yitpomam, Yitnasei, Yitador, Yitaleb, Yitalal, Shemei, Yitkusha, Eila min kol birchata v'shirata, v'shirata v'nechamata, damiran v'yalma v'yimru, Amen. Yehi Shlama Rabba Min Shemaya, Chaim Aleinu V'Al Kol Yisrael V'Yimru Amen. Oseh Shalom B'Romav V'Yaseh Shalom, Aleinu V'Al Kol Yisrael V'Yimru.
And now we'll rise for Hatikva. Thanks to everyone who participated today, Yosef, Jeff, Gary, and the committee. make them generous. The recommended donations a minimum of 18, but do what you'd like. But take the envelope, send it back to us. And now we'll rise for Hatikva. I was just told Alan's going to stay around for a little while, so if anybody has any questions or any comments, he'll be here to be happy to share with you. Thank you all for coming, and again, candles and everything at that door. Thanks to everyone who participated today, Yosef, Jeff, Gary, and the committee.